The summer of 1887 came heavy and still over the valley. It's a kind of summer that pressed down on a man's chest and made even the horses sweat before the sun had lifted high. Dust clung to boots and wagon wheels, rising in soft red clouds over the narrow road that led to the small American village tucked against the hills. It was a place where every soul knew the sound of the church bell, and every stranger was measured twice before being greeted once. Time moved slower there, carried by the rhythm of the blacksmith's hammer, the creak of rocking chairs on porches, and the gossip traded in whispers at the general store. Yet beneath the quiet surface, the village carried stories of longing, pride, and choices that no sermon or lawman could ever fully explain. It was into this world that two sisters came to be known by all. Their parents had long passed, leaving the girls in the care of an aging aunt who sold herbs and candles by the roadside. The elder sister was striking. Her beauty seemed almost touched by something heavenly. Strangers passing through would stop and stare, remarking that she was the kind of girl who belonged in paintings, not in a dusty village hidden in the folds of the land. Her dark hair caught the light like silk, and her laughter rang sharp and clear as though she had been born for attention. Wherever she walked, eyes followed, and with every look, she grew more certain that the world owed her devotion. The younger sister was different. She had no brightness that drew crowds, no features that made passers-by stumble in wonder. Instead, she moved quietly, keeping her gaze lowered, her voice soft, her hands always busy with work that others overlooked. She gathered herbs for her aunt at dawn, carried water from the creek, and stitched clothes long after the lamp burned low. The villagers often forgot she was there at all, her presence like a shadow along the walls. Some pitied her plainness, some ignored her, some without meaning harm simply never noticed her heart was made of a gentleness more enduring than beauty. That summer, when the Apache band camped near the hills, the village watched with mixed ice curiosity, fear, and a guarded sort of respect. The men rode tall and quiet, their faces unreadable, their pride as visible as the weapons slung at their sides. Among them was one whose bearing set him apart. He carried himself with a calm strength, his eyes steady, his silence commanding, more than another man's words ever could. When he entered the village, people shifted aside without knowing why. He was not cruel, nor was he boastful, but there was a presence about him, as if the land itself had shaped him to stand firm where others bent. The elder sister saw him first, of course. From the porch of the general store, she let her gaze linger as he passed by with his companions. She tilted her head just so, letting the sunlight catch her hair, her smile blossoming like a flower that knew exactly when to open. And as often happened, the villagers whispered, watching, waiting to see if the mighty stranger would fall, as so many men already had. She was certain he would, but he did not. His glance slid over her beauty as one might glance at a painting. In a window acknowledged, admired for a heartbeat, then forgotten. He did not pause, nor bow, nor offer the smallest word. It was as if her loveliness, so carefully displayed, had no hold on him. The crowd felt the weight of her silence then, for the first time perhaps realizing that beauty alone could be refused. Her laughter that evening was brittle, and though she tried to brush it aside, a spark of disbelief had settled deep within her. The younger sister, meanwhile, carried on with her duties unnoticed. She had seen him too, though she had not dared lift her eyes for long. Something about his presence stirred a quiet unease in her chest, not fear but a recognition she could not name. That night, as she sorted herbs by candlelight, her thoughts strayed again and again to the way he had walked steady, unhurried, as though the world could never command him to move faster than he chose. She pushed the thought away, telling herself it mattered little. After all, men like that never saw women like her. Days turned to weeks, and the Apache remained near the hills, trading furs and goods with the villagers. Each time they came down, the elder sister sought to capture his gaze. She wore her finest dresses, her brightest ribbons, her boldest smiles. Yet still he looked past her, never unkind, but never lingering. The other men admired her openly. Some even quarreled for her attention, but the one she most desired seemed carved from stone, immune, untouchable.
Ow!
Whispers grew louder. The village began to murmur that perhaps her beauty was not enough, after all. the younger sister found herself crossing paths with him in quieter ways. At the creek one morning, she saw him watering his horse. She nearly turned back, but something kept her feet rooted. He noticed her then, not in the way men noticed her sister, but with a steady glance that seemed to weigh her very spirit. She lowered her head, clutching her bucket, unsure if she should speak. Yet no words came, only a silence that felt oddly full, as if the creek itself had hushed to listen. He nodded once, a gesture neither grand nor dismissive, and she carried the moment with her long after the water was drawn, and so the pattern continued. The elder sister's pride began to crack, though she hid it behind laughter and charm. She could not understand how her beauty, which had conquered every heart before, could be rejected by this one man. The younger sister, meanwhile, wrestled with thoughts she dared not name, for it seemed foolish to believe someone of his strength and stature could ever look twice at her. Yet each passing day deepened the sense that their paths were inching closer, threads weaving silently beneath the surface. By autumn, the air grew cooler, and with it came a festival in the village square. Lanterns swung from wooden posts, music lifted from fiddles, and the people gathered with laughter and food. The elder sister prepared as though for battle, dressing in scarlet, her hair shining like fire under the lanterns. She was determined this night would break the silence. This night she would claim the gaze she had been denied. She danced, she laughed, she shone brighter than any flame. Yet still his eyes did not linger. The younger sister stood at the edges of the crowd, watching from the shadows as she always had. But as the music swelled, she felt his gaze find her quiet, steady, undeniable. And in that moment, the noise of the festival seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of his eyes upon her. She felt her breath catch, her heart stumble. And for the first time she wondered if the world might hold a place for someone forgotten, someone overlooked. Yet just as quickly fear gripped her. What if her sister saw? What if the village noticed? What if this fragile thread of recognition was torn before it could ever become more? She turned away, disappearing into the night, the unanswered question hanging heavy in the air, and the Apache, standing beneath the lantern light, watched her vanish with a look that no one else understood. For while the village celebrated and the elder sister shone, his heart had already begun to move in a direction none could have guessed. But fate, as it often does, was waiting with its own hand poised to strike in the quiet lives of the two. Sisters were about to change forever. Morning broke with a thin mist over the fields, and the church bell sounded the hour like a spoon tapping a crystal glass. The festival's lantern ropes still hung across the square, tired and swaying, as if the night's songs had left a breath in them. The younger sister walked early, as she always did, skirt hemmed dark with dew, a basket on her arm for herbs and bread. She kept her eyes on the ground, but every few steps she felt the weight of last night's glance return to her. A steady warmth at her back, a quiet that hummed beneath the rooster's call. She told herself it was nothing. Then she told herself it was something she must forget. And then she told herself nothing at all. The elder sister woke late to a mirror. She brushed her hair with a force that made the bristles hiss, each stroke an argument she meant to win. The glass gave back the beauty she trusted, the one gift the world had confirmed 1,000 times. She dressed and stepped onto the porch as the square began to stir. A few men tipped their hats, eager for the usual smile. She gave it bright, as sugar and it satisfied them, but not her. She looked toward the hills, half expecting he would ride into view and undo the strange insult of his indifference. Only dust moved there, lifting in pale ribbons over the road. The aunt's little shop sat where the road bent toward the creek. Bottles of liniment lined the shelves beside bundles of sage and wild mint. The old woman had weather in her bones and sense in her voice. She watched the sisters come and go as tides, one high and glittering, the other low and constant. Morning, she tied a string around a packet of willow bark and said to the younger, "The land has its ways. What's meant to grow will find soil, even in a hard place." The younger sister nodded, not sure whether the words were about herbs or hearts, and not brave enough to ask. The Apache camp near the hills had settled into a rhythm that was neither friendly nor hostile, but respectful of space. Smoke rose thin from their fires in the evening, and during the day a few riders came to trade. The village sharif, broad-shouldered and careful with words, kept to the edges of every exchange, making sure no one mistook pride for threat. Blacksmith, arms black with soot, found value in the horsehair ropes they brought and the way they knew to read tracks when a rancher lost a calf. And the preacher, who feared most what he did not understand, preached calm from his pulpit. We will meet each neighbor as neighbor until proven otherwise. The words rang fine on Sunday and trembled a little by Thursday. No one knew why the Apache stayed so long that season. Some said the creek above the ridge had gone clear and strong after a stubborn drought, and they were honoring an old place. Others whispered they waited for news, or for a time to pass, or for someone lost to return. How the elder sister cared only for one reason, that he would come down again, and that this time something would break in her favor. She imagined 100 new ways to be seen. She sang at the well. She helped a child find her shoe and looked up to be caught being kind. She wore a dress the color of the last light over the hills. She laughed at a joke before it was told, just to put sunlight in the air. But when he did ride in, slow and steady, he gave every person the same portion of his gaze, which was to say, he gave no one claim over it. The younger sister met him next at the creek. It was not planned. Her hands were deep in the water, rinsing a strip of linen the aunt used as bandages, and the cold had stung the bones of her fingers. She didn't hear his steps on the stones. She only felt stillness swell in the light around her, like cloud cover over a field. When she looked up, he stood on the opposite bank, his horse huffing and tossing its head. His eyes found hers and did not move away. She tried to drop a curtsy, but the bank was muddy, and she nearly slipped. He stepped down without hurry, crossed at a shallow place, and took the linen from her hand to keep it from the dirt. The gesture was small. The air around it made it large. Neither of them spoke. The creek did the talking, a low, even sound, like thought. He returned the linen, then reached to his saddle and brought out a small bundle wrapped in leather. He opened it far enough that she could see dried leaves, carefully tied, and a twist of root, clean and whittled. He lifted his hand, asking. Without words, she nodded, understanding that he traded. She took from her basket a string of lavender and a folded square of the aunt's cloth. Their fingers did not touch, but each felt the nearness of the other as something living. He nodded. Once, the same way he had nodded that first morning, then he turned his horse and moved back across the stones. She watched until the slow rhythm of his going fell into the rhythm of the water, and she could believe, for a moment, that she had imagined all of it. By the time she reached the shop, the aunt was sorting beans and looking at nothing in particular. "Careful, child," she said, and the younger sister dropped her eyes. "With the knife?" the girl asked, though there was no knife in sight. The aunt smiled without showing teeth, with the part of you that feels too much and speaks too little. The days were like cards turned one by one, each carrying a small picture of what had been and what might be. The railroad surveyors came through, faces red from the sun, voices full of maps. They pointed toward the hills and argued over lines on paper, and the village grew tight with talk. A line meant change. Change meant strangers. Strangers meant law and money and a kind of noise that never sleeps. Some saw wealth in the iron path. Others saw lost the end of a quiet in which a person could hear his own name inside his own head. The Apache watched the surveyors from a distance. Something about the way they stood, feet planted, eyes never lifting to the horizon, felt like a claim that had not yet asked permission. The elder sister noticed too. Not the iron or the maps, but the way unease ran through the village like a draft under a door. Worry makes people restless. Restless people look for distraction. Had been distraction before, and could be again, but it tasted different now. Every time she heard a laugh that was too loud. Every time she saw relief flash across a man's face when she spoke to him, she felt less like a person and more like a lamp. Something had shifted inside her since the rejection the Apaches. Quiet refusal had set a mirror where no mirror had been. She told herself he was arrogant, or blind, or both. She told herself nothing had changed. But some evenings, she found herself looking at the younger sister with a feeling that wasn't simple. Love was there, years of it, but beside it, something raw and sharp grew, a weed that could choose either side of the path. One afternoon, the Sharif came to the shop. He laid a hand on the counter as if it were a saddle and said, "Your aunt's poultice works. Tell her thanks." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Keep to the road right now. Folks are nervous, and nervous makes foolish." The younger sister bowed her head and promised. When the door closed, the aunt tapped the table twice. "Fear is a wind," she said. "It fills the sails whether you mean to move or not." Night wind arrived hard from the north. Dust rose and crawled along the street as the lanterns snapped on their lines. The sound of shutters banging carried through the square like a warning. In the lean-to behind the aunt's shop, the younger sister lay awake listening, her heart keeping time with the ropes that sang above the road. Sometime after midnight, a soft knock came at the back door. She sat up, thinking first of thieves, then of the aunt's cough, then of her own foolish hope. She pulled on her shawl and opened the door a finger's width. In the lane, under the bending cottonwood, stood a figure. He did not step forward. He said one word, a name. It was hers. The aunt rose without sound and stood behind her. "Invite your guest," she said, as if tea were the point. The younger sister opened the door. He moved into the spill of light with that same steady calm, wind lifting his hair, coat dusty at the hem. He touched 2 fingers to his chest in greeting. On the table, the aunt set down 3 cups. No one sat. He reached again to his saddlebag and placed on the table a small river stone, smoothed to a soft egg by water and time. A simple thing. But on its face was a faint mark, a pale slash in the shape of a half-moon. He tapped the mark with a knuckle, then pointed toward the hills, then toward the creek. The aunt's eyes narrowed. "He wants to show the place," she said softly, "or he wants you to know he knows the place." The younger sister's hands trembled. She looked to the aunt, then to him, and found in his face, not demand, not hurry, but a request as patient as winter. Before she could answer, a second sound cut through the wind. Horses, many, coming at speed. The 3 of them stood still as stones. The aunt blew out the lamp. The room folded into the dark. Over the rush of hooves came voices, rough with drink or fear. It was hard to tell which. The riders pulled up near the square. Boots hit the ground, and angry talk rose in a wave and broke against the dark like a storm against rocks. Words floral road, fence, river rights. And between them that other word spoken to easily by men who couldn't bear not knowing, blame. The Apache lifted his hand, arm up, asking for patience. He slipped out the door. No more noise then. The door itself made on its hinges and vanished into the alley. The aunt lit the lamp with a small twist of flame. "Close it," she whispered. "Bolt it. And don't go near the square." The younger sister did as she was told, but her heart ran ahead into the street and into the night and would not come back to her. By dawn, the riders were gone, leaving only ruts in the hard ground and words floating like ash. The square looked like a room after a bad argument. Chairs out of place. A broom knocked over, nothing broken but nothing right. The blacksmith hammered his iron with more force than needed. The preacher spoke with the Sharif under the cottonwood. Faces set in a way that meant trouble had not ended but only just begun. On the hill road, a long trail of dust marked the path of someone who had left before sunrise and not looked back. No one told the sisters what happened. No one had to, Village is a mouth you can hear the stomach in it. The elder sister moved through the day like a figure in a painting that had been tilted and set crooked on the wall. She saw the worry in faces, the quick glances toward the hills, and felt a prick of fear, for the first time fear that had nothing to do with attention and everything to do with safety. Her eyes found her younger sister more than once, and each time she looked away before the younger could look up. Near noon, a child came running with a message. The Sharif wanted the aunt at the square to tend a man with a cut on his scalp. The aunt wrapped her bag and left with the child, her steps fast and sure. The younger sister waited in the doorway, looking at the river stone on the table. In a shaft of sun, the pale half-moon glowed as if it were warm. She touched it and felt the cool that meant water had done its slow work on it for a long, long time. She should have stayed. She should have done as the aunt had told her. Bolt the door, keep to the road. Let the day pass without choosing. Instead, she tucked the stone into her pocket, took a shawl, and walked toward the creek by a path through the cotton and willow, a path only children and birds used. The air was crisp and smelled of dry grass and iron. Each step felt like the first step after a fever breaks, weak and necessary. She reached the bend where the water turned over a bed of bright pebbles and found the mark. A half-moon carved small into the bark of an old elm on the bank. The sight made her chest ache. She knelt, hand on the trunk, and was about to stand when she heard the soft thud of hooves on the other side of the bend. She looked up and saw him. He dismounted in one smooth motion and tied the reins. He didn't smile, but his eyes warmed as though the sun had crested the ridge. He pointed to the mark on the tree, then moved his hand along the bank, indicating a direction farther upstream where the creek vanished into brush dense with reeds. She rose and took a step to follow. A breath of wind set the reeds whispering. The moment felt held, like a note sustained and waiting to resolve. Then a twig snapped behind her. Not the clean break of a deer, a human misstep, heavy, careless, too near. She turned, heart hammering. Through the leaves came the elder sister, dress catching bramble, mouth set, eyes bright with a desperation that glittered like glass in a field. "What are you doing here?" the younger sister whispered, the question as much for herself as for the woman before her. The elder sister didn't answer. She looked from the younger to the Apache, then back again, and the expression on her face was a map of all the roads fear can take when it loses the path. The Apache had gone still, hand loose at his side, gaze unreadable but not unkind. The creek kept its low talk, indifferent to the choice opening in the air. From the square, faint and far, a bell began to ring once, twice, an alarm, a summons, a call no one could mistake. The sound ran along the water and into the trees, and found them there by the marked elm. The elder sister's breath quickened. The younger sister reached for her hand on instinct and stopped halfway, suspended, a bridge only if the other side took a step. The bell rang a third time. Louder, and a shout rose behind it, clear as day and hard as iron. Whatever waited upstream in the reeds, whatever the half-moon stone had meant to show would have to wait. The Apache lifted his head toward the sound, then looked at the sisters' eyes steady, as if asking them to choose not just a direction but a fate, and from the bend in the path. Hidden by willow and dust, another set of footsteps approached fast, unfriendly, too sure of themselves, closing in on a secret that was no longer safe. The footsteps in the brush came closer, breaking branches without care. The younger sister pulled her shawl tighter, her breath caught in her throat. The elder sister stepped back, dress whispering against the reeds, but her eyes never left the Apache. He stood steady, shoulders relaxed yet sharp with awareness, as though the land itself had warned him this moment would arrive. The bell in the square rang again, a harsh sound cutting the air, and the men's voices carried through the trees, angry, restless, ready for something to blame. The younger sister pressed her back to the elm, fingers brushing the carved half-moon. The mark felt like a promise, but now it seemed also like a warning. She remembered the aunt's words about fear being a wind, filling sails whether you meant to move or not. She could feel it now, pushing everyone in directions they had not chosen. The elder sister finally spoke, her voice low and sharp. "You should not be here with him. They are already saying too much in town." Her words trembled with jealousy, but beneath it was real fear. She knew what men in groups could do when their blood was hot and their reason clouded. The Apache lifted a hand, palm open, urging silence, and then he motioned toward the reeds upstream, urging them both to follow. The younger sister hesitated, torn between the danger behind and the uncertainty ahead. The elder shook her head, anger sparking. "I will not run like a guilty thief," she hissed. But the sound of hooves on the road cut her protest short. Riders were near, searching. One wrong glance through the trees, and all three would be caught together. They slipped into the reeds, the water lapping quietly around their boots. The creek curved away, leading them to a thicket where cattails grew tall.
Ow.
The Apache led with certainty, as though he had known this hidden path all his life. When they reached a sheltered bank, he crouched and pressed his palm to the ground, listening to the earth more than the air. The sisters waited, hearts pounding. The elder stared at him with a mix of awe and resentment, as if his calm under threat shamed her own trembling. The younger kept her gaze lowered, her thoughts tangled in both dread and a strange pull toward the unknown. Back in the village, trouble had swelled. The railroad surveyors claimed their stakes had been moved, posts cut down in the night. Fingers pointed at the Apache camp, though no proof was shown. The blacksmith swore he had seen boot tracks, not moccasins, but his voice was drowned out by the louder ones. Men gathered with rifles leaning against their shoulders, muttering about teaching respect. The preacher tried to soothe, quoting scripture about peace, but the words fell flat. Even the sheriff's measured voice could not cut through the fever. Rising at the aunt's shop, the old woman saw the shift as clearly as weather. She packed herbs in silence, her hands sure, though her face was grave. She had seen anger move through people before, quick, hungry, impossible to satisfy once it found a target. When a boy ran in to say his mother wanted her at the square, she sent him off and closed her door. She knew the square needed more than herbs that day. The younger sister, crouched in the reeds, thought of the aunt and longed for her steady voice. The Apache suddenly placed the river stone in her palm again. Its cool weight was steadying, and she understood it was a sign, a reminder that some things endure even when the world shakes. She clutched it as the riders' voices neared, their words carrying through the trees. "Check the creek," one man said. "Tracks lead this way." The elder sister's breath caught. She turned to the younger with a wild look. "Do you see what this means? They will think we are part of this. You want to destroy us both?" The younger opened her mouth, but no words came. The Apache leaned closer, his face calm, his eyes clear. He whispered in broken English, low and certain, "Trust Creek. Follow." Then he slipped silently into the deeper reeds, vanishing like smoke. The sisters huddled together as the riders drew near. One horse splashed into the shallows, its rider scanning the banks. The younger pressed her hand over her sister's wrist, urging her to stillness. The elder trembled, but she obeyed. The men cursed, muttered, and finally turned back toward the village. The sound of hooves faded, but tension clung like a burr in the air. When they were alone again, the elder wrenched her arm free. "You risk everything for him," she spat. "For a man who does not even speak your tongue." Her eyes shone, not only with anger but with hurt, and the younger saw that this was not only about pride. It was about fear of being left behind, of being unseen. The younger wanted to speak, to say that she had never chosen this path, that it had chosen her. But the words stayed trapped. As they made their way back through the brush, the sound of distant shouting reached them. Kesusa men were gathering in the square, their anger no longer contained. The elder quickened her pace, muttering about reputation, about survival. The younger lingered, every step heavy with the knowledge that something larger than herself was unfolding, and that she was already caught inside it. By evening, smoke rose in thin trails from the hills. The Apache camp had lit their fires, not in threat but in quiet defiance, a sign that they would not move on command. In the village, lanterns swung above the square, casting restless shadows as men sharpened their voices against one another. The sheriff stood at the center, trying to hold the line, but his words were swallowed in the noise. Some called for peace, some for force, and between them the night thickened with the taste of storm. The elder sister dressed carefully, as if armor could be sewn from silk and ribbon. She meant to stand among the villagers and reclaim what she thought was hers: dignity, place, control. The younger sat by the window, holding the river stone in her lap, listening to the hum of voices drifting from the square. Her heart told her the true story was not in the lantern light, but in the shadows along the creek, where promises had been marked in quiet symbols. She felt the pull of both worlds, one loud and insistent, the other silent but deep. And as the night wore on, two sisters found themselves staring in opposite directions, one toward the square, one toward the hills, while the village itself stood on the thin edge of decision, ready to tip with the first hard shove. The conflict was no longer just between sisters, or between village and Apache, but within the soul of every person who called that place home. The bell that had rung earlier seemed still to echo, a warning that the next sound might be sharper, and that once it came, nothing would be the same. The night thickened like smoke, pressing down on the village until even the stars seemed to dim. The square burned with lantern light. Men gathered in tight circles, voices sharp with anger. The railroad surveyors stood on a wagon, maps rolled under their arms, shouting about missing stakes and broken posts. Every word poured oil on the fire. Some villagers swore it was the Apache who had done it. Others whispered of rival ranchers trying to stir trouble. But the truth mattered less than the need to blame. Fear had hardened into anger, and anger was hunting for a face. The sheriff stood in the middle, hat low, jaw tight. He spoke firm, but the noise rose over him like waves over a rock. The preacher tried to quote scripture again, but even his voice trembled, and trembling did not steady anyone. Men fetched rifles from wagons, leaning them where every eye could see. The sound of metal being loaded echoed through the square, each click like a spark waiting to catch. The elder sister lingered near the well, her dress perfect, her smile practiced, but her eyes restless. She wanted to be seen as calm, as untouchable, yet the storm of voices reflected in her gaze. The younger sister did not join the crowd. She stayed near the edge of the square, half hidden, clutching the river stone in her hand. Its smooth weight was her only anchor as the air grew hotter with every shout. She searched the edges of the crowd, and once, just once, she thought she saw him, the Apache, watching from the shadows beyond the cottonwood. If it was truly him, he moved like a shadow, silent, careful, seeing everything. Their eyes met for only a moment, and she felt again that same steady calm, a promise in the middle of chaos. Then came the crack of glass. A bottle shattered against the dirt, and a man shouted that enough talk had been wasted. Another voice rose, demanding the Apache be driven from the hills. A third warned of blood spilled if anyone dared strike first. The noise tangled together, and no voice could be heard above the rest. The tension wound so tight, it felt as though even the air might break. From the hills, smoke rose heavier than before. Some swore it was signal fire, a call to gather. Others muttered it was only cooking, but no one cared for reason. The sight of that dark plume was enough. The crowd surged, splitting into two currents, those who wanted to march toward the Apache camp, and those who begged for restraint. The square turned into a living storm. Bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, faces lit with rage or fear. On the ground itself seemed to tremble with their shouting. The elder sister stepped forward, lifting her chin, her voice ringing sharper than the preacher's or even the sheriff's. If they mean us no harm, let them prove it. Why do they hide in shadows if they have nothing to fear? The words struck the crowd like a match. Some cheered, others hissed, but all looked at her. She had wanted their eyes, and now she had them. Yet behind her boldness was desperation, the kind only the younger sister could see. The younger clutched the stone tighter. She wanted to speak, to tell them of the moment by the creak of the quiet trade of herbs and cloth, of the half-moon mark that meant something older than anger, but her voice stuck. She was only the plain sister, the one noticed. In that square, her words would scatter like dust and wind. She stayed silent, and the silence burned. The Apache stepped into the lantern light at the edge of the square. Came alone, unarmed, his horse waiting behind him. The crowd stilled in one breath. He did not flinch under their stares. His eyes swept the faces, calm, steady, unreadable. The younger sister's heart thudded so hard she thought the sound might give her away. The elder's face blanched, then flushed with heat. Ach! She had called for proof, and now proof stood before them, more powerful in its quiet than any words. She had spoken. The sheriff moved quickly, hand raised, placing himself between the Apache and the rifles leaning nearby. He came alone, the sheriff said. That means something. But his words barely held. The tension had climbed too high, and one wrong sound could send it all crashing. From somewhere in the crowd, a rifle cocked. The sharp metallic snap silenced even the restless lanterns swaying overhead. Every eye turned. Every hand went still. The Apache did not move, only stood with the same quiet strength, as though the earth itself was beneath his feet and would not let him fall. The younger sister felt her breath catch, her throat tight. She wanted to run to him, to stand by his side, but her legs would not move. The elder stepped forward instead, her face pale, her hands trembling at her sides. For once she had no practiced smile, no easy words. She looked at him, then at the younger, and in her eyes burned a storm no one else could read. The bell at the church tower began to toll again. Each strike deeper than before, rolling across the square like thunder. Voices rose in answer, anger mixing with fear, and the rifles shifted in men's hands. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a single spark to decide which way the fire would spread. The Apache's gaze found the younger sister once more. In that glance was no fear, no plea, only a quiet certainty, as if he had known all along that this night would come. She closed her fingers around the river stone, feeling its cool surface bite into her palm. Around her the crowd roared, the elder's voice cut through sharp as glass. The sheriff shouted for calm, and the preacher prayed louder than he ever had before. But none of it mattered in that instant. What mattered was the silence between her and him, a silence charged with everything unsaid. The rifles lifted, the shouting rose, and the bell rang again, louder, faster, as if warning that the next sound might not be a bell at all, but something far harsher. The bell's last toll seemed to shake the earth itself. For a breath, no one moved, no one spoke. Rifles hung in trembling hands, voices caught in throats, and the square felt like it might split apart. The Apache stood still, his shadow long under the lantern light, his eyes calm in the face of the storm. Then, from the edge of the crowd, the blacksmith stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "Hold your fire," he said, sharp enough to steady more than one trembling hand. "If blood spills here tonight, it won't stop. It will spread." His words carried weight, for he was not a man who spoke lightly. The men shifted, mutters rose, but no shot came. The sheriff seized the moment, his own voice loud and sure. "He came alone," he said again. "You all saw it. Lone, unarmed. That is no act of war." The preacher, trembling but brave, lifted his hands and prayed aloud, words rolling over the crowd like slow water. Some men lowered their rifles, though others still clutched them with tight knuckles. The elder sister stepped nearer the well, her face pale as porcelain, her lips moving but no words leaving. She had wanted this moment to prove her worth, but now it was too heavy for her shoulders. She looked from the Apache to the younger sister, and a truth she had long denied rose sharp in her chest. Her power over men's eyes was fading, and it frightened her. The younger sister, heart pounding, stepped forward at last. She held the river stone in her hand, raising it so all could see. "This," she said, her voice shaking but strong enough to carry, "was given in peace. A mark of trust, not threat. You see it as nothing, but it means everything." The crowd wavered, uncertain. Some scoffed, some frowned, but others quieted, listening. The Apache's gaze rested on her, not on the crowd, as though her courage was the only thing that mattered. The surveyors on the wagon exchanged uneasy looks. Their plan had been to turn village anger toward the Apache, to clear the way for the railroad without resistance. But the sight of the stone, the weight of silence, the slow cooling of rage, slipped their grip. One of them shouted about stolen land, but his words fell flat. People were tired of being pushed, tired of being told where to place their anger. The sheriff turned on them, sharp-eyed. "You've stirred enough tonight. Take your maps and leave before dawn." His order struck with authority, and no man in the square dared oppose him. The Apache finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, accented but clear. "We do not seek war. But we will not vanish for your lines on paper. The land remembers who walks it." The words struck deeper than any weapon. Some men bowed their heads, shamed. Others looked away. The elder sister trembled, the ground under her pride slipping, while the younger felt the stone's weight in her palm as though it pulsed with life. By the time the lanterns burned low, the rifles were lowered, the surveyors gone, and the crowd broken into small knots of uneasy men. No battle had been fought, but the air was heavy with what could have been. The Apache mounted his horse, nodding once to the sheriff, once to the younger sister, then disappeared into the night, leaving silence that rang louder than the bell. In the days that followed, the village moved carefully, like a wounded animal testing its limbs. The railroad men packed their stakes and drifted on, muttering about easier routes. The sheriff gained respect he had not sought, his calm seen now as strength. The preacher kept his sermons quieter, less about thunder, more about patience. Blacksmith worked his forge steady, his voice often reminding men what nearly burned them all. At the aunt's shop, the air smelled of herbs and simmering teas. She spoke little, but her eyes carried pride when they rested on the younger sister. "Words matter," she said one evening, "but only when carried with truth." She placed her hand over the stone the girl still kept close. "Keep it not for what it is, but for what it reminds you to be." The elder sister grew quieter after that night. She no longer sought every gaze in the square, no longer tried to command every moment. Some said she had been humbled, others whispered she had been broken, but in her silence was a slow turning, a search for worth beyond beauty, though she spoke of it to no one. Sometimes her eyes lingered on her younger sister, and though envy still flickered, so too did something softer, almost like regret. The younger sister carried herself differently. People noticed it, though few understood. She did not shine like her elder, but she walked steady, and steady had begun to matter more. She thought often of the Apache, of the calm in his eyes, of the way silence between them spoke louder than words. She knew he had returned to his people, to the hills and rivers that were his home. She did not dream of changing him, nor of binding him to her world. She only held to the truth that for a moment 2 lives had touched in trust, and that trust had changed her. Seasons shifted. The fields grew, harvests were gathered, and winter winds carried smoke from both village chimneys and the Apache campfires on the ridges. There was no war, no raids, only a quiet distance, like neighbors who did not embrace, but no longer raised weapons. The land itself seemed to breathe easier. The railroad never came. Tracks were laid far to the east instead, and the hills remained untouched, save for the feet of those who had always known them. Years later, when people spoke of that night in the square, they remembered the shouting, the rifles, the bell, and the man who had walked alone into the lantern light. But they also remembered the girl with the stone in her hand, plain and unremarkable until she spoke with truth. Some said it was that moment, more than any other, that turned the tide. And though many forgot her name, the story lingered like the scent of smoke after fire. The younger sister never sought to correct them, never asked for glory. She lived quietly, helping her aunt with herbs, listening to the whispers of the earth. But in her heart, she carried the memory of calm eyes, a half-moon carved into bark, and the lesson that peace is held not by the loudest voice, but by the steady hand that refuses to let go. The elder sister, too, found her way. Pride softened into something humbler, and though she never admitted her fear aloud, she learned to see worth not in mirrors but in moments of kindness. The jealousy that had burned in her cooled, leaving behind a gentler fire. The 2 sisters, once divided, slowly drew closer, bound not by beauty or envy, but by the night they had both survived. And so the village endured, balanced between change and tradition, between the pull of the rails and the roots of the land. The Apache remained, the hills their home, the creek their lifeline. People learned, slowly, that coexistence was not surrender, but survival. The stone stayed with the younger sister, passed one day into the hands of her own child, its smooth surface carrying the weight of stories untold. In the end, the tale was not of beauty won or lost, nor of land stolen or defended, but of the fragile thread that held people back from the edge of destruction. It was a story of sisters, of jealousy softened, of trust earned, and of silence that spoke more than any rifle ever could. And as the years turned, the memory of that night reminded all who lived there that peace, though fragile, could be chosen even in the face of fire.